Where's
Oh yeah, I'm fine.
well, Fred, thank you so much for helping with my project. I know we worked together like a long time ago. We even had conversations about space, and I remember you
Yeah.
saying that it would be tourism that would probably be the real driver for opening up space.
Yep. Profit motivators are a powerful thing.
Oh, indeed, and with competition,
Yeah.
you know, doesn't doesn't matter if only one guy runs the 100-meter dash. I doubt he'd be that fast.
That's exactly right. Just enough to win.
Just enough, exactly. If you talk about really stretching out that one event.
Exactly. I'm the best in the world. I'm the only in the world.
They,
I wore, by the way, I wore what I believe is an appropriate shirt for the
I,
occasion.
I also have an appropriate shirt.
Oh, yours is even more appropriate.
I even have Jim Bridenstine fan club shirts. The
Oh
current
wow.
NASA. I
Yeah.
know. I feel like the man from La Mancha, except instead of it being chivalry, it's space.
Exactly. Got to get there.
Yeah. But maybe it'd be good to start off by you saying a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, well, hi everyone who may end up watching this. My name is Fred White. I am currently the CEO of a small software company called Laser 911. We work in public safety. We help locate people when they call 911, and we send that information into first responders and 911 operators and stuff. So that's what I do for my day job. But in general, I'm kind of just a science buff and sort of high tech, geeky sort of guy forever. I've known Nathan for, gosh, decades, but it's been the better part of most of those decades since we've actually been in the same place at the same time, or even on a video conference for a while. So that's me.
Now, people have complained that the Uber driver knows where they are, but the ambulance driver doesn't.
Yep.
Is Laser 911 the solution to that?
Yeah, we're part of that. It's a takes a village sort of thing with public safety. There's a lot of moving parts. Cell phone companies are really kind of the single most important part of that these days, because almost everyone who calls 911, even from their home, is doing it on a cell phone. And so we work directly with big cell phone companies. We can't really talk about much of what we do with them, unfortunately. And we work with some of their partners too, to help them make the systems work better. They're the only entities in this country anyway that are required by law to actually, get your information to the right place, and that's an FCC mandate and part of their licensing. And we help make that happen. So it's better now than it was when we started. We founded Laser about 4 years ago, 3.5, 4 years ago. And it is definitely better now, but we're still doing more and cool stuff all the time.
Yeah, and back to our kind of previous analogy about the one guy running on the racetrack, I was
Sure.
wondering if ambulance services and 911 centers then kind of like the reason you don't see the innovation there is because there's only one 911 you're going to call. There's only one service
Right.
there, and as long as they don't completely mess it up, or at least
Yep.
mess it up for the wrong person, then there's really they're keep on keeping on type of thing.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting. There has been some privatization in 911 call centers, but even then, it's still the local authority. So whether that's your city or your county that's responsible for where you're calling from, if they choose to outsource that to someone, they can. Decades ago, that wasn't legal, but now they can. And there are competitive bids for that, and there are a few different companies that sort of run 911 call centers on behalf of cities and counties. And so there's a little bit of competition there. But yeah, at the end of the day, anything related to law enforcement and public safety, it's all sovereign immunity. And yeah, there's really only one provider there. So but yeah, it is interesting that I read somewhere that some, I don't want to get it wrong, but some inordinate percentage of people have started calling Uber or Lyft to go to the hospital instead of calling 911 to get ambulances sent to them. They believe they'll get there faster if they do it that way. So there's sort of some de facto outside of the normal mode of operation competition going on.
Uh, I'm just waiting for that to show up in my Uber app. You have like Uber Pool, Uber Black, Uber Ambulance.
It very well could happen. And speaking of space and things like that, and competition, once the Tesla rideshare thing, if that's still a thing, people just basically put their Teslas into a pool of cars that can drive around on their own whenever they're not using them. I could definitely see good old Elon wanting to to disrupt something and having Tesla ambulance service.
Yeah, probably based on the Cybertruck. That thing
Yeah,
pulls up
that
and just put the patient in the back, and
that's right. Room for everybody.
uh, and it looks like you don't even need to have the preferential traffic lights with the Cybertruck. You just drive through.
Exactly. If somebody bounces off you, no big deal.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So, did you know we were planning to send people back to the moon in 2024?
So I've been keeping up a little bit with it. Probably not as much as I could. But I was thrilled to watch the recent, the Crew Dragon. I think I'm saying that right? That went up, and I watched both the takeoff at that moment. I watched when they docked, and then I watched when they left as well. So it's super exciting, and I know everything's little incremental steps eventually towards Mars, right? So go back to the moon, and then hopefully onto Mars, and who knows where after that.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. But people are like, why are we going to the moon? We've been there before. We should just go straight to Mars. But I think that kind of misses the whole potential of space exploration development. I mean, we shouldn't be a teenage civilization going around the solar system taking selfies.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and it's funny, and I know obviously these are all works of fiction, but there have been a tremendous number of sort of Mars related and longer space journey related, um, you know, motion pictures and books, and now Amazon series and all sorts of stuff. And I think one of the things that, really has been highlighted in all of them is we're still incredibly fragile in space, right? And one little thing goes wrong, and now an entire mission could be lost, right? The works of fiction tend to focus on like the drama of a single person potentially getting lost or something, but the reality is, um, one little mistake in space can be catastrophic, and until we're a lot better at it than we are now, it's a massive risk to spend the money and the human capital to be throwing people towards Mars. That it's not like rovers, right? We've bounced a lot of rovers off of Mars that failed to land appropriately, and or were damaged in the landing and couldn't quite fulfill their mission. You don't want to do that with a crew of 6 or something like that. So yeah, we definitely need to walk before we run. And I'd say at this point, the previous missions to the moon, we were crawling, right? We haven't really even walked, right? So yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to to get better at space generally, before we start taking really big leaps out, further into the solar system, and hopefully someday beyond that.
Yeah, and I mean, in orbit, an astronaut has a problem. I mean, they could literally be down on the surface within half a day.
Right.
And there's a lot of scenarios where you can stabilize people enough that they could survive half a day and still recover from that. But
Right.
even from the moon, I mean, a 3-day journey, I'm thinking you probably know if they're going to make it or not at the beginning of that 3 days. You don't have to
Exactly.
wait. But and then whenever you go to Mars, you don't even have the 3 days. They're like
Months.
months. And one other key point is communication.
Sure.
The International Space Station, you have 3 to 6 astronauts up there at any given time, but they're supported by thousands of engineers and scientists and technicians here on the ground I mean, they don't solve their own problems, right? I mean, they
Yeah,
say,
right.
Houston, we have a problem.
Right.
Houston sends off a team. They
Yep.
come back with step-by-step instructions, and they follow those steps.
Sure.
Whenever you're 15 minutes in communication distance away, that really limits kind of like how they can support you.
That's exactly right. I mean, that was a great point illustrated in both the book and the movie The Martian, right? Where
Mm.
for extended period of time he had no communication, right? And he's totally on his own. But then even once he had it, there were, you know, huge not just time delays, but because the first mechanism he set up was so, was basically, flashcards. And so it solving problems at a distance, we're just not used to that anymore, right? Yeah, it's almost like space, is back to colonial United States times, right? So you need to get a message to someone. Someone's hopping on a horse and taking off. It's going to be a while before they know what it was you wanted them to do.
Yeah, and back there in colonial times, having crews on ships that would go off for months at a time in an autonomous way, I think allowed for us to develop sort of like the social skills and the psychology and the expectations and organization and everything to support that as like a civilization. But now, I call my son, he doesn't answer. I'm like, we should call out the cavalry.
Exactly. Yeah, we are definitely used to instantaneous, both fairly instantaneous travel, right? It's getting faster and faster, and certainly instantaneous communication. And you just made a great point, right? I mean, when the age of exploration, right, on Earth anyway, right? So just really naval exploration. Those were massive ships and crews by those days standards, and yet in space we've gone the exact opposite direction, right? Part of that is just the limitations of how much weight we can get off of the planet up into space, but we've also sort of now started to think of that as space missions are these tiny little self-contained capsules that go off and do whatever they do, as opposed to when we were even exploring right here on our own planet, it would be dozens or hundreds of people on what for the time were massive ships, because they knew they would need that sort of support mechanism wherever it was they were going, right? You sent people over across the Atlantic. You were sending at least dozens, if not over 100 people, because once they got there, it was not going to be habitable, right? And they were going to have to do a tremendous amount, and that's on a planet where you can breathe the air and find fresh water and drink and things like that. And yet, with Mars, the idea, at least in some people's head, is we're going to throw three people at it. They're going to fly for a few months and then they'll figure it out when they get there, or they're going to have these incredibly limited supplies to deal with. And if any one thing goes wrong, you don't have a tree to chop down or a stream to fish in. You really can't improvise for a lot of those things.
Yeah, and it could be something as simple as running out of gloves for your spacesuit. you know,
Exactly. Yeah, you're done.
you're done.
Uh, take
That
plenty
was
of
nice.
take plenty of duct tape.
Definitely, yeah. And um, so what do you hope we get out of returning to the moon? I mean, I presume it's something you're supportive of, but
Yeah, sure.
a lot of people look at the opportunity cost. They look at, I've even heard some people say, we've messed up the Earth. Why would we mess up the moon too? Which is kind of interesting perspective. But
Yep.
I mean, how's it you as a taxpayer, member of civilization, all these things? What would you want to get out of sending humans to the moon?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I was saying about, we need practice, right? At the very least, we need to make it so that a trip to somewhere like the moon is as safe and effective and predictable as a plane flight on Earth, in my opinion. We Otherwise, if we can't manage that, how the heck are we going to go much, much further, right? And while it's true, I don't see space exploration as, oh, we're going to destroy the Earth, so we have to go find a new home. I'm simultaneously hoping we kind of find a way to not destroy the Earth a bit. but because in my opinion, I think, we are far enough away from finding a habitable place that we could actually get to in large numbers, that we're going to have to do something about the Earth before that, right? We're not just going to magically either terraform Mars well enough that millions or hundreds of millions of people could go there, or find another planet we can get to. So I think, we got to fix things here on Earth, but while we're doing that, we have to get better at space. And so I think, missions, and I hope it is plural, right? Missions to the moon need to be about just getting better at it. And I think we need to establish a permanent, I don't know if colony is the right word, but a base on the moon, both for research, right? Learning more about, and granted, once you're on the moon, you're not in the zero gravity or even microgravity, that they experience elsewhere, and that we have to deal with and understand better. But at least you're getting, some lower gravity experience. Just get way more information about how humans even react for long term in space. I just watched a thing about, um, I forget which of the twin brothers it was, the one that went to space and the one that stayed on Earth.
So Scott
Mark
Kelly
Scott
is the one that went to space, and
Scott went and Mark stayed.
yeah, and he's the
Yeah,
one that's running for senator, by the
exactly. Yeah,
way.
running for Senate. Yeah, and he's Gabby Gifford's husband, right?
Exactly.
And so I watched the study about, Scott, and that's great that we did that, but man, we still have such limited understanding of the impacts of long term stays in space on people. And again, you have to kind of turn to the science fiction world for people to sort of be guessing at what it's like, and then you get all these weird, you get space insanity if you're in space too long. But I mean, that's based off some theories, right? Some psychological theories that, we're just not meant to be either that isolated, be so distant from our culture and people. I think it takes a really special kind of person to be able to handle that. And that's why also, the whole, oh, uh, people, the whole let's bypass the moon and go straight to Mars, and already have, rich people paying to go to Mars. Man, not everyone's going to be, cut out for that kind of trip. I don't think people realize how confined you are and how debilitating that must be psychologically. And so I think a moon trip, sort of helps, or multiple moon trips and establishing a base there and people staying there long term. I definitely think that's a good idea. And I haven't actually looked enough right now. I'm sure you know better than I do. Um, in the current plans of what are we going to do officially, right? What's the official plans for going back to the moon? I would think, in my only somewhat informed opinion, that, you know we'll eventually even maybe even get to the point where we could use the moon as sort of a literally launching pad, for other trips, right? Now, granted, you have the same trouble if you got to get stuff to the moon in order to do things on the moon to then launch things even further. But at least breaking some of the massive requirements of getting out of Earth's gravity, to maybe launch things easier, and, sort of a staging platform for trips further away.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a really good point in terms of we discovered there's water ice in the poles of the moon in these permanently shadowed craters where it's always in the shadow and it's like colder than the surface of Pluto.
Oh, wow.
And over billions of years, comets have apparently hit the moon, and some of those water molecules have made it into these permanently shadow areas and have frozen, and they've just been
Ah,
stuck there. Now, what is it like to actually go and extract that material at those temperatures? I mean, this reminds me of, you get the drill bit and you start drilling into something, it keeps breaking off,
exactly. Yes.
it's
Yeah.
it's uh and it's been permanently preserved, but one reason why is because nobody can do anything with it.
Exactly.
But water, it was what, about 11 pounds per gallon, I think. And you can turn it into hydrogen, oxygen, and you have the right rocket engine. You can use that for fuel, and even if you displace that weight, for like breathing and drinking and rocket fuel, I mean, could make it worthwhile kind of
Sure.
harvesting it. Maybe don't launch from the moon. Maybe you extract that from the moon and put into orbit and kind of refuel around
Yeah,
the Earth
right.
or something. So,
That's true.
but you know about the we need to go to space because we messed up the Earth. That argument always had a very big technical problem to it, and that is there is no place in the solar system that's even close to being able to support humanity, like you were saying.
Right.
And you're going to have to be living under the surface in domes, very. And if you're going to be doing that someplace else, why not
You
just
could
do
do that
that?
on Earth.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, in effect, other than like the gravity situation, the damage we're doing to Earth is making it more like some of the other planets that are already there, right? We're destroying the atmosphere, we're making the air less breathable, we're making the temperature hotter, right? So maybe we're slowly turning ourselves into Venus. I don't know, but yeah, that yeah, you're right. If you're going to go terraform Mars, well, you could re-terraform the Earth in similar ways. Um, yeah, so to me, going to Mars is not a solution to we're destroying the Earth, right? That can't be what it's for, or going to the moon for that matter, right? Those are stepping stones for us to get to the point where that we travel space like we travel the Earth, because yeah, and perhaps it's even to the point of permanent space structures, right? Yeah, maybe we're not going and terraforming a planet, maybe we're building massive space structures, um, like super massive space structures, that become livable secondary places to be. um, but then
Yeah,
that has all the fraught problems of saying, well, why don't we just build those under the ocean too, right? Because I always compare space travel to ocean travel, right? Because you're in an environment that if something goes wrong, and I mean under the ocean travel, right? So submarine experiences, if you're deep enough, it's the same as space, right? Because if something goes wrong with the thing that you're in, you're dead, right? Because we can't exist in those environments. Um, Wonderful places to go, lots of things to learn, but very inhospitable to humans. And so that's another thing I'd like to see too. And none of these should be seen as either or, right? We should be thinking both and. Similar to Earth, or sorry, moon exploration, we should be doing more with you know simulated space exploration here on Earth. I think that's a great way to prepare for space travel, is put yourself in similar situations here on Earth. I don't mean biodome necessarily. Something like that can be good, but like, yeah, there's a lot in common with being underwater with being in space. So we could do a lot of stuff there too.
yeah, that's a very good point, and it'd be a good test to test out some of the psychological issues that we talked about earlier. You
Sure.
know, can you spend 2 years in an isolated pod with 3 other people without killing
Yep.
them or being
Yep.
killed?
Well, I forget which streaming service or other media company did the recent Space Force series.
Ah, Netflix.
Oh, okay, that was a Netflix series. Yeah, the Steve Carell, and they did sort of a biodome sort of thing, and the kind of payoff there was they were only in it for like weeks, and they already hated each other, and couldn't take the isolation, and so and I think when Steve Carell went in, he made it like 2 hours and was already losing it. But so yeah, so there's definitely opportunities for us here to get better at figuring out how might people react in a long-term space environment.
But it's sort of kind of a circular argument to say that we need to go to space to get good at going to space to go to space. you know, but I mean, I know you have a background in philosophy, and you've been studying like humanity and people and lots of stuff. I was just wondering, is there some other argument in terms of is something a little bit more foundational or something that would stand alone of why we need to Because some people are like, just stay here on Earth. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, right? The argument shouldn't be go to space to get better at going to space so that we can go a little further in space, right? I think it's foundational in the point that if 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 we as a species are going to continue, nothing is forever, but as close to forever as we can get, um, we not only need to get off the Earth, we've got to get out of this solar system. And so I think it's in our nature to want to learn and explore and continue our species, and whether it's uh, because the planets are inhospitable, or millions of years in the future because the sun does something funky, or maybe not that far into the future because some other unanticipated inbound space catastrophe. We're as a species, we've got to be able to go somewhere else, right? It's the equivalent of a person being on an island in the middle of the ocean, and or instead of a person, a small community being on an island in the middle of the ocean. Say, well, we'll just stay on the island forever. It's like, okay, what if there's a flood? What if there's anything? What if there's a famine on our little island? So we are on an island. We just don't think of it that way in our everyday life because the island seems so big. But every day it gets smaller as there are more of us, and as waters rise and things happen. So I think it is fundamental to who we are as a species that we want to learn and grow and explore and endure. And so we got to go somewhere to make that happen, because this planet won't. It would. I don't, and not in the sense of climate change, in the sense of like I said, inbound space catastrophe, or the sun, you know, novaing, or what's our sun going to do? Is it going to implode or explode? I don't know.
Yeah, I
Uh,
hear it like expands and gobbles
yeah.
up like the first three planets, and then it's there for a while, and then it kind of that kind of puffs away, and then it's left with a little bitty shell of itself. That's what I've heard.
Ah.
But I mean, our problem is we've only been observing the sun in any serious form for a few hundred years.
Hmm.
Uh, so we kind of have like all these different stars in various states, and it's like we kind of put them in order. I mean, can you imagine just getting a snapshot of every single human in the world, having no clue about how each of those humans change over time, and try to talk about the life cycle of human beings, you
Yeah,
know?
that's a great comparison, right? And it's like, yeah, there's this one human being that we've paid extra special attention to, but only for a while.
Yeah.
And then there's all these others and the funny thing is, and I know, science gets better all the time, but to a certain extent, a lot of astrophysics is still, theory. We're interpreting essentially visual, and in some cases other wavelengths, but you know uh, impulse data from millions and billions of miles away, and we're saying, oh yeah, we know how that works. It's like, I don't know, maybe not. um
And
we're
it's all
still
from
learning.
one perspective too. I mean, it's
That's right.
like imagine observing a house from the perspective of one room and trying to create a floor plan. You know,
Exactly.
how many obvious things that how many obvious flaws in that floor plan could easily be found out by just stepping in the hallway.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true.
So let's see. It looks like we have like 4 minutes left. Did you have more time, or
Oh
are
well,
you?
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of flexible.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's kind of funny. We have two billionaires who are both really heavily invested in space. We have Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. And,
Hmm.
listening to you talk, I can't help but think that you're more of a Bezonian, if there were, because he talks about, how there's no place in the solar system that's even remotely close to being habitable for humanity, that we need to develop space to protect the Earth. I mean, power is something we could always use more of. If
Hmm.
power was cheap, we could do all sorts of things. And when you think about, we have this huge nuclear furnace in the middle of our solar system producing massive amount of energy, of which only 1/700th billionth falls on the Earth's surface.
Wow.
You could think about, I mean, that's unlimited energy. I mean, you just, and you could also take care of global climate changes some by just putting your thing at the L1 point between the Earth and the sun to kind of provide
Cool it
like a
down a little
shade.
bit.
Exactly. You could kind of expand them and um, let more light in if you got too cold. Make
Yeah.
the light go away if it got too hot. Um, and do like mining in space. I mean, using metals to store value is completely silly, really, right?
Right.
Because metals have unique properties. Like gold's a great um, conductor, and it's a great kind of covering or protective type thing. But because it's so expensive, we can't use it like that. But
Right.
what if gold was cheap and was treated like copper,
That's right.
or platinum or what have you? It's just kind
Yeah.
of
Well, the fact that that we're still immature enough in our development that we place value in things other than their intrinsic value is a little bit silly, right? So, um, a particular ore should only be valued based off its scarcity and cost of procuring it. There shouldn't be any extra value on it of, ooh, it's shiny and I like it, you know. And so um, that that I think should be part of what drives our mentality, as opposed to, kind of like how we think of diamonds too, right? Diamonds have this kind of mystical value associated with them, and we do that with lots of different minerals too. So having bigger availability of them because we mined, comets or mined asteroids or mined other planets or whatever, but also just a little bit of a change in our thinking might be nice in that regard, right? We're still cavemen and women at heart, right? So we're kind of like, ooh, shiny thing, I like it, and therefore it's worth more. Um, but yeah, and so between Musk and Bezos, yeah, I guess. I mean, the funny thing is, I think because SpaceX sort of got there first, and has been around longer, got more attention longer. I'll be honest, I don't know as much about what all Blue Origin is. That's right, Blue Origin, what all they're doing, right? I did actually just see a headline that I think they just completed a successful test of some sort. Um, but it'll be interesting to see how those two companies sort of evolve and continue to duke it out for maybe as much mind share as anything else, right? It seems that the funding isn't the issue, right? Those guys will plow as much money into it, and people, like-minded people, will plow money into those endeavors. um, it's really about mind share. It's people and governments wanting to do business with them and staying interested in them and encouraging them to keep doing what they're doing. Um, Again, I forget if which streaming service just I guess it's an older series called Mars,
hmm.
or because yeah,
It's
Away was the Netflix original, and then there was something else called Mars, which I think is an older series.
and like
One of the
National Geographic, Nat Geo, I think, did that one.
Yeah, and I think Netflix may have just like re-aired it recently. But so that was part of, what they did thematically, was they made the point that the first trip to Mars that actually really went off was sort of this international conglomerate, but it was, and there was government involvement, but there was also definitely private sector and profit motivators. And so, that that's part of where we are with space now. It is this sort of public-private thing. I hope it doesn't become. I forget if we had started recording when you know mentioning sort of the space tourism side of things. I hope that doesn't become the leading edge at any point. Um, I just don't like the feel of that, right? I do think it should be science forward and learning and expanding and exploring, before we start launching billionaires and multi millionaires on field trips to Mars.
Yeah, indeed. And it's really unclear on if those millionaires and billionaires would go themselves.
Right.
I think they'd be
Well,
like,
and those two in particular, whether or not they will, someone else, right, will throw money at it and say, "Oh, I want to be on the first trip," or I want to be on the second trip, whatever the case may be. I think that's right. That's the whole idea behind Virgin Galactic, right? Is find the not quite as wealthy people that are building these companies and let them come play on what those companies are building.
absolutely. And um, if it was safe and affordable, would you personally have an interest in going into space?
I mean, from I mean, like outside of the realm of what's real right now, if it were as safe and affordable as other means of travel, sure, yeah, I'd be very interested in doing it. But then, I mean, I liked scuba diving when I was young, right? I haven't done it much recently, but you know obviously based off some of the comparisons I've made, while going to the moon would be more than a scuba diving trip for a couple hours, um, I think I would enjoy that experience. I don't know if I'm cut out or not for like long term mission sort of behaviors, but a few days or something like that seems interesting, and certainly orbital. Uh, an orbital excursion, if it were again safe and affordable, yeah, I'd be very interested.
Now, there's a reality TV show that's in the works to search the globe for an individual to go to the International Space Station for 10 years, not 10 years, 10 days.
Hmm.
Um, is that something you can see yourself competing in, or would you like, not quite?
Yeah, probably not. Not now, but maybe for me more because of non-space related personal stuff, right? Just it's hard for me to even think, because while the idea there is just go for 10 days, I'm sure there are weeks or months of intensive training they would insist on you going through before you could go do your 10 days. And so I don't think I'm in a position to do that. But yeah, if it were like boarding a plane and going like it is for uh, terrestrial travel, yeah, I'd be interested in that. Sure, that'd be 10-day trip. Yeah. But it's not like that now, right? I mean, as we were just talking about, right? Even if they sent you with a crew of very experienced astronauts who are all very good at solving problems and everything like that, I don't think they would want someone who knew absolutely nothing about what they were doing to just sort of be along for the ride. I think you have to at least get some training these days.
Now, there have been some really wealthy individuals that have paid the Russians to take them to the International Space Station.
Hmm.
I think there's something like 10 or 12 like private space explorers. But I mean, they went through the intensive training. They were
Right.
trained just like an astronaut. So,
Yep.
um, so have you ever heard of the Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program?
No.
Okay, so NASA has these experiments they want to put on the moon, rovers and things like that. Used to, NASA would build the lander, build the rocket, launch the lander, do the whole thing. But they've decided to take more of a package delivery mentality. They're like, hey, we have these packages, we want to get to the moon. Who out there can deliver them for us? And so they've
Hmm.
certified 14 different companies to basically deliver packages for them to the moon. And every year, NASA, or at least for the next few years, NASA bids out 2 different contracts to this group of 14 companies, and basically says, "Hey, deliver my package here. I pay you this much. You take care of the details." And part of taking care of the details is if there's any spare capacity, they could do whatever they want to with that. So NASA's like the corner, the big anchor store, and then you can have all these little shops around that, right? Well, one of the companies that's going next year, Astrobotic, would be the first company out of this group to actually land something on the moon for NASA. Is doing something with DHL, where you can buy a moon box and actually have something of your own sent to the moon. And like the smallest things, like about the size of a micro SD card, which is like $450. So I've paid for that. and I'm planning to put this video on that
Oh,
card. So you're going to the moon. Yeah.
woohoo! That's great. I mean, I love posterity things like that, right? So it's, sort of a time capsule idea, and all the way back to Voyager, right? We were sending, encoded messages out into space. So I think that's really cool, to, you know, to commemorate things like that, and to have a service like that, and very creative on the commercial company's part, right? To to offer that out to people. Yeah, it's like the name a star, and things like that. Yeah, again, I think it's fundamental to who we are. We're explorers. We also like the idea of existing beyond our mortal time. So anything like that, I think, is appealing to people.
I just ordered the terabyte micro SD card today, which I think I'm going to have plenty of space on. I plan to put the Wikipedia, but any other ideas on what I should
Uh,
add?
oh wow. Yeah, it's too bad you can't coordinate with everybody else who's also made the similar purchase, right? And you can be strategic in what you what you put on there. I mean, I think if I think for you, literally you, beyond, you're really good about thinking about sort of the bigger picture and humankind and everything like that. But obviously, I think it'd be cool to do some, family things. Put some stuff that's unique to you and your family. I think that'd be cool. But yeah, I think doing a series like this in the first place is very cool, and also sending it to the moon is like probably the coolest way to sort of end the series. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I only get to send the stuff up until November 15-ish of
Yeah.
this year because they have to have it to integrate the payload in next year. So hopefully they do it in subsequent years. Otherwise,
You keep shipping up volume 2, volume 3.
exactly.
Well, if
It's,
you send, yeah, Wikipedia, you got to make updates, right? It's
oh,
changing all the time.
whoever finds is going to be so confused. It's like,
It's like, this is what was true at a moment in time.
I know that president was absolutely worst. That president was actually best. It's the same guy. I'm so confused.
How did that happen? Time.
Time.
Everything changes.
Well, Fred, is there anything else that you want to talk about that we didn't get to?
No, this is a great. I just love the project itself. I think it's a great idea. And I was happy to be a part of it. It's very fun.
Well, if you know anybody else, I got 1,537 more days to go. So
Slots to fill. Yeah.
exactly.
Well, I'll definitely get the word out.
Cool.
All
Well,
right.
you have a good day then.
Cool. Thanks, David.